the European Parliament or the European Union cannot even decide how many genders do we have in the world. I mean, like men and women. So this is the biggest problem of European Union, of European policy, to decide how many genders do we have. And now imagine that if they do have such a big problem with such a simple question and such an obvious question, how can they solve or approach very complex, very difficult technical or international issues? They are completely unable to do that because simply they don't have a mental capacity to see the reality as it is. And that's why our party and our political groups call for reform of European Union. We are calling the European Union to be reformed and return back just to economical cooperation like it was mentioned or meant to be before, and leave these political issues and these abstract themes, as you mentioned, just away.
Why do you think these establishment parties continue using that style of politicking? Because it strikes me as very immature and not very effective. Why do you think they are not perhaps more sophisticated or even more cunning?
Simply because they are blinded. They are blinded. They really believe that they are better than the rest of the world, that they have the right.
Well, they may believe all they want, but they cannot be blind to the fact that other people don't share their perception of them.
But actually, they are blind to see that. And that's why they don't use any sophisticated communication methods, because simply they don't see it. And the best they can do is to simply label or mark their political or opinion opponents as extremists, as radicals, as Russian agents. What's happening right now? Come on. What's happening right now? Right now, the Western politicians, they say that there are plenty of dictators and not democratic governments all around the world, and that we should impose sanctions against Russia, against China, against Syria, against many, many other countries, which don't blindly follow the ideology of European Commission or European leaders. And they are imposing sanctions. But look around, they are imposing sanctions almost on the whole world. So at the end of the day, they are not making isolated those countries. They are making isolated themselves. They are making isolated the West. And that's why we call to stop this madness and to come back to the table, to diplomacy, and start living again peacefully.
Because there are many people, especially in East Germany, who no longer think that, they have to somehow be remade into proper Europeans, that their entire GDR legacy has to be sort of condemned and put aside. What do you think it signifies? Do you think it's just a German thing, or do you think it applies more generally to some phenomenon in Europe?
I think it's a general phenomenon, and it will continue with former and forward elections. Regarding the situation in Germany, I don't think that elections were a result only of social welfare issues or GDP or salaries, but the people are simply not satisfied of what's happening with their countries, to one reason, which I think that the change is coming from Central and Eastern European countries, is that we had a previous regime, communist regime, where we were able to see that censorship, and simply our people, our citizens, can more easily recognize that they are being lied to, and that the reality is completely different as described in mainstream establishment media. On the other hand, people on the western part of Europe, they are more trustworthy to the mainstream media. They simply cannot believe that they are being lied to, that they are being manipulated by media owners or by some politicians or some governments, and that's why they need a little bit more time to wake up and to see that the Europe needs change, because otherwise, their countries are simply doomed.
I think you would agree with me that the European enlargement, at least after the Cold War, was based to some extent on the idea that the former socialist bloc countries were victims of communism, and Western values were seen as the tool of essentially fixing them. And there was sort of this element of good social engineering. We will make you into proper, liberally minded human beings. And we are seeing another wave of that with all those new age ideas about gender, which you mentioned, also about many aspects, social aspects of society. Do you think those powers that are pursuing that doctrine, this new social doctrine, will actually let you have your vision of the future of not only sovereign nations, but I assume sovereign people as well, where everybody can make a choice about how to lead his or her life, how to raise, kids, how to choose faith, etc. Do you think those powers will allow you to have that?
I don't think the question stays if they allows us. It's not that they are right to allow or don't allow. They are elected to rule the countries, to follow the will of the people, of citizens, and that's what they should do.
But I'm sure you know that they're very much, they have a lot of influence, both vivid and sometimes secretive, and they're pretty entrenched in the ways they're doing things, aren't they?
Yes, indeed, they are. But the change can be done. We saw it many times in history, and I'm sure that the change will come. When you mentioned the previous era, the communism, that the people in Western countries feel that they have the right to somehow teach us, to lead us, to tell us what's wrong and what's right. Come on, we don't see previous regime, communist regime, as a dark age, because we have lived in the regime. Of course, there were some bad things, but there were some good things like social policy and so on. And we say that we should learn from the past, that what was wrong should be simply changed, and what was good should be followed and take to the future. And I think this is the approach forward. And again, I don't care about what the governments think, because I'm not being elected to follow the governments. I was elected by our voters, by our citizens, to follow and apply our political program, which is simply different. And if we will have the chance, we will apply it. That's it.